So I want to talk about, I know I talked a little bit about barriers in terms of the work that we do, but I'd like to talk to you a little bit about my homeschooling journey and some other homeschooling journeys of families that I've worked with. So I started homeschooling my son, who I mentioned earlier is 16 years old, when he was in preschool. And we really just had a home environment that was already conducive to learning. Learning was just kind of this normal part of life. And I homeschooled him through the first half of kindergarten. But then I became pregnant with my daughter, who again is 13 years old. And I got very, 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 very times 3 million varies sick. And I just couldn't continue to parent, let alone to homeschool my son. And then on top of that, my daughter was born with heart failure. She was born early. We had to do an emergency C-section to essentially save her life. The doctors did not expect her to live, and she did, but we went through a whole year after her birth, recouping from that, getting her healthy. And it was a very, very disruptive and very, very traumatic time in our family's life. Even though I wanted to homeschool my son, like I said, I really just couldn't do it. I believe that, so I want to talk about what I call ability currency. You can use the word capital. I like the idea of saying currency because we immediately think of something that's tangible that we exchange for something in return that is beneficial to us. And so when we think about ability as currency that we can invest or sow into our homeschooling experience and yield a return, I want us to think about that ability beyond economic ability, beyond economic capital, to be able to help us homeschool. So one of the things that I did not have access to at that time was an ability currency that is community. We did not have strong family ties for various reasons. We did not have strong community ties also for various reasons. And so when we were going through this really horrible time in our life, it was just on us. And there wasn't the support system that produces several things. One is just the help that you need. Something as simple as meals, providing meals for us, watching the baby so that I could rest and recover, helping me to homeschool my kid, right? Whatever that might have looked like. It just wasn't there. The other barrier within that situation that also I think is interconnected with community is while I was pregnant, I started to have some depression. And then after she was born, I experienced postpartum depression. And so growing up in the Black community, nobody ever talked about mental health, at least not in terms of something that was not shameful to talk about, but instead that was something that was necessary for you to take care of yourself, the same way that if you have a stomach ache or you have a rash or something that you go to the doctor, or preventative care so that you don't have to go to the doctor. We just did not frame mental health in those terms. And so because of that, I was not educated about signs and symptoms of mental health issues. I did not recognize that I actually was depressed. And it's tragic, honestly, because I was having thoughts and feelings that I was so ashamed of. I felt so sad all the time, and I thought, maybe I don't want my baby. Maybe I'm going to be a horrible mom. And and I don't want to tell anybody this, right? I don't want to tell anybody how I'm feeling. And when my daughter was born and she had heart failure, I thought, it's my fault. I broke her heart. She's sick because of me. She's sick because I was sad. And then, that depression continuing after her birth, I didn't want to tell anybody that I felt that way. I didn't want to tell anybody that it was my fault that my daughter was sick. And, even though that felt very, very real to me, you and I both know that that was really irrational, right? It was irrational to think about that. So on top of not already being a part of a community that doesn't talk about mental health and normalize mental health, I think it's something that's emerging more now, but this was 13 years ago. Not being educated about the issues, that can emerge in mental health, and then hiding it, and then not having community there, it wasn't good. It wasn't good, and I could not homeschool through that. One of the things I want to say about community is that oftentimes when we're going through something, we can only see what we see within our bubble of what we're experiencing. And when you have community to step in, whether it's family, church, other spaces that you're a part of, to step in and be intimate, to walk intimately with you in a safe and trusting way, those people can look from different perspective and say, Joyelle, I actually think that you might be experiencing some depression. I think I think we need to help you, you need support in this area, and so on and so forth, right? That community brings a full perspective to what's going on and gives information about how they can support you. So I believe that those are some barriers, not having access to proper mental health education, and then access to getting that help. Where do you even go to get that help? And having enough Black and brown practitioners that you feel safe to talk to with, or having enough practitioners that share your same faith, so that you feel comfortable talking about spiritual issues in that context as well, should those issues come up. And then, like I said, not really having access to the community that's needed. So moving on, when my daughter was in third grade, I just felt like she was having some learning differences that I couldn't quite put my finger on, and the public school system was not helping her. They wanted to put her on an IEP. We found a school that would put her on an IEP, but they couldn't put her on an IEP unless we had an official diagnosis from a doctor, and our insurance didn't cover the testing that she needed, and we didn't have the money. So I eventually decided to homeschool her, and within the first year, so we can talk about that as another barrier too, is access to learning evaluations to find out, what our children are dealing with, and then having the capital and or the materials to be able to address, and the training to be able to address those learning differences. So in our first year of homeschooling, we went and tried to find some co-ops to be a part of, but as many of you probably would understand where I'm going with this, we were the only ones, and y'all know what I mean when we say we were the only ones, and we just didn't fit. People didn't really embrace us. I found like when we were going on field trips, my daughter and I were just kind of together, and she wasn't interacting with other kids. The kids weren't interacting with her. We just didn't belong. And so two other women and I, Black women and I, who were homeschooling, decided to start our own co-op. And we met once a week, and we taught our children enrichment, culturally enriching classes that were rooted in Black identity. And the nature of our co-op was that the parents were to contribute, teach classes, run field trips, bring food, on and on and on. But over time, we found that our families were really dealing with really heavy things. So I'll just list some things that people were dealing with, and that not just within our co-op, that as I've worked with other families that have come up. So learning differences. The majority of our women were single parents. I started off married. But then our second year of the co-op, I went through a horrible divorce. So we had the majority of women there were single parents. They were working parents. Almost all of our parents were working. Some of our parents were living below the poverty line, and were dealing with domestic violence, like I said, divorce, legal issues, depression and other mental health issues, housing issues, clothing issues, transportation issues, just a whole host of issues that are life issues that make it difficult to sustain homeschooling in a homeschooling environment. And many of our families were constantly put into the space where they had to say, okay, do I have to put my kid back in the public school? But knowing that the public school was not the best option for their child, what do we do? So another ability currency that I briefly want to talk about is deep conviction. Deep conviction being a type of currency that allows us to continue to homeschool, sacrificially homeschool, even through all of these things. But over time, that currency can lose its value. That conviction can begin to lose its value, and it can be challenged because we don't have the community and the wraparound services needed to be able to support us in those life issues, like I talked about with my own experience. There's a lot to say here. I'm starting to run out of time. I can talk forever, and I just think that, again, this is such an important conversation to have. Just to wrap up, barriers that I want to talk about, or that I have talked about, are having to deal with a school district that puts a lot of pressure on parents to school their children the way that is not necessarily conducive to them, having to do administrative stuff that makes it really difficult, not having access to academic scholarship that helps to inform other organizations on how to provide services, not having the capital, the economic capital to use however you need to use for your family, not having access to mental health services, to learning evaluations, not having access to wraparound services around poverty, domestic violence, divorce, legal issues, everything that I mentioned. This is a huge topic, and like I said, I'm so glad that we're actually talking about this today. So yes, I hope that this was helpful and informative, and I am just so grateful to all of you for attending and for having me speak on this subject. And let's work together and do whatever we have to do to make sure that our people have what we need to school our children at home, because they're worth it. We're worth it. All right. God bless everyone.